Hello, my name is Matt Reed, and I'm the Principal of Planning and Policy at FO10 Planning and Design. And this is presentation number 3 as part of public meeting number 2 for the plan phase of the Downtown Guelph Heritage Conservation District Plan that is currently being undertaken by the City of Guelph. This presentation specifically shares information on how the HCD plan will be used in order to guide intensification within Downtown Guelph. And when we say intensification, we mean both vacant sites, so parking lots or sites that are not currently developed, or underutilized sites, so sites that might currently have a building on them, but that building is much lower than would currently be permitted within the city's policies. For other definitions that I'll be using throughout this presentation, please be sure to reference back to presentation number 1, Introduction. When we look to provide guidance on intensification within a Heritage Conservation District plan, there's 2 objectives that we really need to keep in mind. The first of these is that while the Downtown Guelph HCD plan seeks to protect, conserve, and manage heritage attributes, including those contributing properties that we learned about in the previous presentations, it's important to note that this will be done in the context of prescribed and anticipated future growth because this is a downtown area. Future growth in policies such as the downtown secondary plan, for example. Given this, it's important that the HCD plan aims to develop policies and guidelines that support new development and infill that is compatible with and enhances the city's existing heritage attributes. So we heard in the previous presentations that the HCD plan will include both policies and guidelines, with policies being mandatory direction that uses shall language and is required, and guidelines being more foundational guidance that can be interpreted in a number of different ways in order to help meet these overarching policies. Talking specifically now about policies for non-contributing properties, and I won't go into each of these policies in detail because we have visual examples on the slides that follow, but it is really important to note that for non-contributing properties, the policies really focus on ensuring new development or additions and renovations to existing buildings that is compatible with the adjacent contributing properties, so nearby contributing properties. This includes consideration of elements such as building siting and location, scale and massing, articulation, etc. Secondly, the policies will focus on ensuring that the development on non-contributing properties does not have any adverse impacts on these adjacent contributing properties. So things like shadows or limiting or destroying identified key views, etc. And in both cases, again, important to note that these policies are grounded in the Statement of District Significance as part of the broader HCD plan that sets the stage for the heritage attributes that are important within the downtown. The guidelines for non-contributing properties aim to provide additional direction to help to meet these overarching policies. However, important to note again that the guidelines are not mandatory and they're actually crafted in order to provide guidance that is both flexible and provides a number of different ways in which the intent of the policies can be met. So, for example, you may have a policy that says new development shall be compatible with adjacent contributing properties, while as the guideline that supports this policy would be a little more in the weeds and focus on specific direction around building setbacks and location, step backs and street wall height, facade articulation, etc. And importantly with guidelines, they can be interpreted in a number of ways. So this ensures that an HCD plan does not stifle creative and unique architecture within the downtown. So ultimately, the onus is on the designer or the developer to illustrate how they meet the guidelines within the HCD. So what do these policies and guidelines actually look like in practice? If we were to build on the contributing and non-contributing mapping from the previous presentations, we've created a number of diagrams that can illustrate what intensification might look like within Downtown Guelph, within both the context of a Heritage Conservation District plan, as well as the broader growth objectives of the Downtown Secondary Plan. And just before we get into the models, and note that these are massing models only, they don't reflect specific designs or proposals for any of these sites, and they're just meant to be used for demonstration purposes as part of this study. So starting with what intensification could look like on a contributing property. So looking at these images here, we've got a bit of a unique corner building right now at Macdonnell Street and Wyndham Street. We've got the Regent Hotel building just to the west of this. And then just behind that, we've got a 3-story heritage building on Cork Street. So both the hotel and the Cork Street buildings are permitted within the downtown secondary plan to have greater heights than what currently exists on these sites. So what if these sites were to redevelop? So both of these sites have a maximum building height permission of 8 stories within the downtown secondary plan. So in the case of the Regent Hotel building, what you might see in a redevelopment, again, because this is a contributing property, is you might get a new addition to the building, for example, on top of the preserved sort of heritage facade or heritage building. And in this case, your addition would actually be well set back from that existing heritage component in order to sort of be subservient to and allow the heritage component to really shine and remain as the key piece of this development. And then you'll see, obviously, the existing heritage building already defines a continuous sort of street wall height and the location of the building at the property line to create that continuous street wall all along Macdonnell Street. And again, as an 8-story building, which is taller than the buildings that are currently in this area, you start to see some additional building step backs. So at the top floor, and you'll see that building step back just above the heritage building as well. These really help to break down the mass of the building, and as a pedestrian on Macdonnell Street, make the building seem smaller than it actually is. And another thing this does as well, by providing the step back at the top of the building, it helps to create a transition in height to the existing contributing property as well at Macdonnell Street and Wyndham Street. Looking at a non-contributing property or some non-contributing properties and how the policies and guidelines would apply, we can stick with the same area and look at maybe the parking lot just to the west of the Regent Hotel building. So again, this is not a site that currently has any sort of heritage development or anything like that. So we'd be starting from scratch with a new development. So what we're looking to do here is, again, you'll see we're maintaining a 2 to 3 story building street wall in order to reflect the existing contributed properties, but also just the general development form along Cork Street. You'll see with the building located at the property line, again, we're keeping that consistent street wall along Cork Street as well. And then similar to the previous example, as an 8-story building, we've got step back as the building rises, which helps to reduce the overall perceived mass of the building. And again, provide more of a transition in height to that adjacent contributing property closer to Wyndham Street. As a further example of a non-contributing property, if we move a little bit northwest, we can start to look at an example where the downtown secondary plan actually permits greater heights than those that are envisioned on these previous sites. So if we look around Yarmouth Street, so this would be just north of Quebec Street and south of the Children's Art Factory building. And you'll see this is also just in the background, you'll see the Baker Street development. So this is an area that has already been sort of flagged as an area for greater density and an area where the secondary plan policies allow significantly greater heights up to 16 stories. So what we'd be looking for in this example is our new building shown in yellow here would do a number of things. So again, we'd be maintaining that consistent 2 to 3 story street wall height because we've got the contributing properties on both sides, including the Children's Art Factory and the other adjacent building. In this case, however, what we've actually done, we've generally located the building podium at the property line, but we've actually pushed it back a little bit further because, again, this makes the whole development kind of subservient to those adjacent contributing properties. And it allows some breathing room around those properties as well. And you'll see we've continued to do that as well on the corner of the new building where we've kind of cut out the corner because, again, this creates some breathing room and a little bit more of a transition to that adjacent contributing property. Again, above the building podium, we've got a step back which helps to define that street wall. And then as we move further up the building, we've got another step back at the top of the building. And this, again, helps to, when we're talking about a tall building, it really helps to create that distinction between a building base, a middle, and a top. And this is really important when trying to create sort of a consistent and a strong skyline for tall buildings. Thank you for listening. That actually brings us to the end of our third presentation for the Downtown Guelph HCD plan. Again, a reminder to go back and watch the first two presentations if you've not already. And in concert with these presentations, as our next steps, we'll be hosting a public open house meeting on May 7th. And then following that, we look forward to releasing a public draft of the HCD plan in the summer and the fall, and then returning again in the fall for our final public meeting and presentation to council. If you need any further information, please contact Imogen Goldie, the city's project manager for this study. Thank you very much.